The boardroom was suffocating with tension. Glass walls trapped the whispers, while the flash of cameras outside flickered like lightning on frosted panes. This wasn't just another meeting, it was a battleground, and every seat at the long-polished table felt like a weapon pointed in David Carter's direction. At one end of the table sat Richard Coleman, smug and confident, the kind of man who relished drama. His voice, sharp and theatrical, filled the silence like a knife slicing through still water. He stood deliberately, savoring the attention, letting the weight of his presence command the room. "Gentlemen," he began, his tone dripping with authority, "and ladies of course, we have arrived at a critical moment. Questions have surfaced about Mr. Carter's leadership, his past dealings, and whether he is truly fit to run an institution of this magnitude. Banking is no playground. It demands credibility. It demands trust. And trust, I fear, is slipping away." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the room. Some board members shifted in their seats, others nodded reluctantly, already infected by Richard's performance. He pressed on, his words like a hammer pounding against David's reputation. "I propose we form a committee," Richard declared, his gaze sweeping the table like a general surveying his army. "An independent investigation into Carter's background, his businesses, his so-called vision. Until then, I see no reason for him to continue unchecked. Stability must come before sentiment." He sat, folding his hands as if the decision was already final. David Carter, seated opposite, had not moved. He sat still, calm, watching Richard with eyes that gave nothing away. But when he rose, his presence filled the room, not through theatrics, but through sheer gravity. His voice, deep and steady, cut through the restless murmurs. "Richard," he said evenly, "let's be clear. These allegations are not real. They are smoke, conjured from your camp and blown into this room to poison the air. But I didn't build my life on smoke. I built it brick by brick, mile by mile, through sacrifice and discipline. And you will not erase that with a whisper." The murmurs stopped. Some of the board leaned forward, intrigued. David's calm was dangerous. "If this were about accountability," David continued, lifting a folder of audit reports, "you would have come to me. You would have read the audits. You would have looked at the contracts. But this isn't about accountability. It's about sabotage. It's about envy. And envy, Richard, is a poor foundation for leadership." Richard chuckled mockingly, though his eyes flickered with irritation. "Sabotage?" he asked, feigning disbelief. "Or just reality finally catching up to you?" "No," David shot back, stepping closer to the table, his gaze never breaking. "It's envy. And I won't answer its call." The room grew heavier. Cameras clicked. The balance of power was shifting, not with numbers on paper, but with the invisible weight of conviction. Richard, unwilling to surrender the stage, switched tactics. He pulled up a projector, graphs and slides painting pictures of instability. He spoke with polish, his tone almost hypnotic. "Ladies and gentlemen, perception is reality in finance. If investors doubt our leader, the bank falls. If the press doubts us, trust evaporates. Can we afford to risk this?" The board murmured again. Richard was clever, he knew fear was the most effective weapon. But David stood, papers in hand, and walked the length of the table. His footsteps echoed in the glass chamber. He handed each member a report before speaking. "These are independent audits," he said, voice steady but firm. "Verified, sealed, undeniable. Every accusation whispered in this room is answered here. If this were about the truth, you'd have read them. But this isn't about the truth. It's about power. And it's about Richard's hunger for it." The silence was electric. Richard's smile faltered. Later that night, David sat in his kitchen, head bowed over stacks of reports and files. Exhaustion etched deep lines across his face. His wife, Angela, entered quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They don't want me there," he confessed softly. No matter what I prove, no matter what I say, Richard will keep pushing until I'm out. He won't stop. Angela knelt beside him, her eyes fierce with a fire that reminded him why he'd fought so long. Then don't give him the satisfaction, she said firmly. You didn't build all this to watch him steal it. You didn't climb this high to step down now. You keep standing, David. You fight, for yourself, and for everyone who's ever been told no. Her words struck him like a jolt of energy. His weariness melted into resolve. The next morning, the emergency board meeting convened. This time the tension was thicker, the stakes higher. Shareholders filled the room, reporters crowded at the back, and cameras captured every flicker of expression. Richard rose again, a viper ready to strike. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice ringing with fake solemnity, before we proceed with the day's agenda, I move for a vote of no confidence in Mr. Carter. The room gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. David stood slowly. He didn't rush, didn't stumble. He adjusted his tie, then looked around the room, his eyes locking with each board member in turn. His voice, when it came, was low but commanding. You want to question me? Fine. You want to doubt me? Fine. But let's set the record straight. I am not here because of charity. I am not here because of favors. I am here because I earned it. Brick by brick. Mile by mile. Sacrifice by sacrifice. That's how I built this bank. And I will not let deceit tear it down. He laid the reports before them. Then, with deliberate calm, he revealed another folder, not about him, but about Richard. Since you want truth, David said, his eyes never leaving Richard, let's show them all of it. He opened the folder and spread documents across the table. Email chains. Bank transactions. Insider testimonies. Each page a weapon, each line a dagger. These, David declared, are proof of Richard's smear campaign. Payments to investigators. Secret meetings. Fabricated allegations. This was never about the bank, it was about his greed. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, stunned faces. Reporters darted out the doors to break the news. A board member flipped through the documents, his expression darkening with every page. Richard paled. His smirk collapsed. His hands trembled. This is fabricated, he sputtered. Out of context. No, David replied, his voice like steel. This is truth. And today, Richard, the truth ends your game. The board shifted uneasily. Some whispered urgently to each other, clearly shaken. The chairman cleared his throat, his voice uneasy. We will need to vote immediately. David stood tall, calm, unwavering. Cameras captured his strength, his composure, his victory. For the first time in months, it seemed the storm had passed. But then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Quiet, unnoticed. He pulled it out, his eyes flicking to the screen. A single message glowed in the dark glass. Carter, you think this is over? The storm is just beginning. When it hits, not even your truth will save you. David froze. His heart pounded. He looked up, scanning the room, every face suddenly a potential enemy. Victory had come, but it was fragile. The war was far from over. The message haunted David all night. Even as the board's stunned reaction replayed in his mind, the words glowed in the darkness like a threat carved into stone, the storm is just beginning. Sleep refused him. Every creak of the house, every hum of the refrigerator, felt like warning signs. Angela noticed the shadows in his eyes at breakfast, but he brushed off her concern. He couldn't burden her with the weight of what loomed. By morning, the news cycle had exploded. Headlines screamed, Carter crushes smear campaign, Coleman exposed in stunning boardroom battle. His picture filled the business pages, his speech replayed on primetime. To the world, David had won. To the bank, he looked untouchable. But he knew better. Richard was cornered, and cornered men were dangerous. At the next board session, Richard was nowhere to be seen. Whispers said he had fled the country, others claimed he was locked in backroom meetings with lawyers. But David didn't trust whispers. He knew Richard wasn't the kind of man to bow out quietly. The storm was coming. The only question was from where. That evening, as the building emptied and the city's lights flickered alive, David stayed behind in his office. Files lay scattered across his desk, proof, strategies, contingencies. He stared at the skyline, its towers glinting like swords against the night, when his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a threat. It was a file. A document. A leaked contract with David's signature, twisted, edited, forged. And beneath it, the message. Tomorrow, the truth will belong to me. For a moment, fear clawed at his chest. If the public believed the forged document, everything he had built could unravel. He would become the villain Richard wanted him to be. But then he remembered Angela's words, "You didn't build this to hand it over. You fight." The next day, as reporters swarmed and social media flamed with the so-called scandal, David walked into the press conference with his head high. The hall was packed, journalists, shareholders, skeptics waiting to see him fall. The forged contract was already circulating online, painting him as corrupt. Richard's trap was closing in. David stepped to the podium. The murmurs quieted. Cameras turned. "I know why you're here," he began, his voice strong, unflinching. "You've seen the document. You've read the accusations. You've heard the whispers. But let me remind you of something. Truth does not hide in the dark. Lies do." He held up the forged document. His eyes swept across the crowd. "This is not truth. This is desperation." With a signal, his legal team wheeled out monitors. They displayed timestamps, metadata, digital forensics, proof the contract was tampered with, fabricated only days before. Layer by layer, David dismantled the trap. Richard Coleman wanted power, David continued, his voice growing with conviction. And when he couldn't earn it, he tried to steal it. First with whispers, then with lies. But today, the lies end. Today, the truth stands. The crowd erupted, journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing wildly. David raised a hand, silencing them. His eyes hardened, and his voice lowered to a near growl. "To the one who sent me those messages," he said, locking eyes with the cameras, "I have this to say: storms may come, but storms pass. And when they do, only the unshaken remain standing. I am unshaken." The hall thundered with applause. Investors clapped. Reporters scrambled for headlines. Outside, the market reacted instantly, shares stabilizing, confidence restored. Richard Coleman's name, once feared, now became synonymous with disgrace. His allies abandoned him. His empire, built on deceit, crumbled under the weight of exposure. And David Carter. He walked out of that hall not just as a bank owner, but as something greater, a symbol of resilience. A man who had faced sabotage, lies, and betrayal, yet stood taller than before. That night, back at home, David sat on the porch with Angela. The crickets sang, the city lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in weeks, peace settled over him. Angela leaned her head on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. David shook his head softly. "No. We did it. Every brick, every mile, every sacrifice, it wasn't just mine. It was ours. And no storm can take that away." He looked out into the night, where darkness once threatened to swallow him. Now, it felt different, like a canvas waiting for dawn. Because the storm had passed. And he was still standing.